you're on a different camera.
Different camera. Yep. Well, let's see if this camera works. Last time the USB camera worked for the whole schlemiel, but we shall see. Okay, everyone, say something when you get logged back in again. Oh, come on. You can do it, folks. One's here. Somebody. And they gave a thumbs up. We got 2 thumbs up and only 1 people. Wow. Hey, Mr. Lodak, how's it going? I should have guessed that from the fact that I got a thumbs up so fast. Oh, man, this... Hey, boss, how's it going? Oh, how's your glycine testing coming out, boss? Probably a week or 2 before we can get into that. Good. I'll ask you when we're ready to start testing what your current state of information is. Oh, yeah, it's a different camera, that's for sure. I don't know. Well, when Ryan comes over, we'll try and have all the hardware, the software, and everything ready for him so that when he is here, he can set things up so that it's fairly straightforward and robust. We'll see what happens. Yeah, that camera kind of sucks because it's such a wide field. It's nice when, like, Eva and I are sitting here, you can see both of us, but watching the, what do you call it, whiteboard there is pretty tough. Longest was 60 seconds. That was for a gold leaf, correct? Have you tried it at room temperature, boss? Because it would be vastly more flexible and applicable if it works. I mean, even if it's, I'm sure it would be slower, but if it works at room temperature, then that would be a lot easier to accomplish. Yeah. Could you please? Because that would be important. I mean, to have an agitation tank heated, to have a pad heated, these things are pretty complicated. Time is pretty easy if you've got it. You just, well, instead of doing it in 10 minutes, it'll cost us, take us 2 hours. That'll work. Yeah, I understand, Kodak. Yeah, I say perhaps a high oxidation level is going to be all it needs. I really don't know.
I'm making a little note on that.
But that would be extremely advantageous if it could be done like that. You won't be able to do bottle roll at different temperatures. You'll have to do it in the beaker, little one. You'll have to use the hot plate. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if you're going to get it to 130 degrees and hold it there, then we have a hot plate, a magnetic stir hot plate, which would work just fine. But a bottle roll or whatever. We are not going to, in practice, be doing anything that's not measured in hours because it just takes long to crush and agitate and whatever. And so as a time, I don't know, Rock. Time is less critical than speed if we can do that. Now, again, if there's critical temperature like 100 degrees F, where that's absolutely critical, okay, then we know that what our parameters have to be, and it will simply be less flexible. There'll be less application, but we can see. Anyhow, so we've got some interesting possibilities there. Sounds good, Mr. Lodak. Someone named Rock is wondering if things are stable. Yeah. Go into the settings, find the video part, and tell the computer which camera to use. Right.
If we do experiments like that, we will not be doing it during our regular live stream.
Yeah, we probably set up just a temporary test stream or something on an oddball time, so that we could play games with that. Again, my natural tendency is to just wait till Ryan gets here, or we can ask him a few questions before then. And so anyhow, agreed, Alex. YouTube seems to be the real kludge in this whole thing.
I'm betting once we get on OBS, it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's my thought too. Let's see what happens when I do this.
Everybody knows YouTube has a crap.
Is that good or bad? Okay, that allows that. Anyhow, some interesting news this week. I doubt you can see it there, but just before start of stream, the gold price was $2,426.10. Hello, People's Herbal. Silver was $31.75. And did the guy ever post the video of eating the silver crayon?
No, we are now all demanding it because the excuse is the person who actually agreed to do that and said they were going to do that is no longer part of this whole thing. So we are now all demanding that anybody, put out a silver crayon video.
Okay. People's Herbalist. Are you the guy from Florida that called Eva earlier? I'm not sure. Without oxidizer, nothing happened, huh? Yeah, okay. Okay. I was just wondering, there was somebody from Florida trying to log on. He was having a little problem figuring it out. I can't really blame him. And then, of course, we just throw several things at him in terms of complications at the same time. What the hell? So anyhow, gold and silver are up. Eva will say more during her segment, but I think the long and short of it is it's really not exactly clear why the prices are going up. There's a certain number of factors, but it's a little bit unclear yet. In our case, in terms of the mining stuff,
and that's not even the craziest news right there.
The sluice did pretty good. We were with the gentleman this week looking at one of his mines, and it was clear that there was a little confusion about the actual procedures and staking claims, buying claims, things like this. So I'd like to kind of go over that a little more, because we have new people here. In the United States, you are allowed to stake mining claims.
Yes, that is Herbalist Islam.
Yeah. And on certain federal lands, In certain states, you can stake mining claims on state lands, usually after paying money. But in the federal system, basically you're confined to most BLM land, most Forest Service land, and let's say the technical term is open to mineral exploration. Military reservations are closed, even if you can drive out there and everything. But if it's military land, no. Any wilderness areas, wildlife refuges, things like that, these are called withdrawn from mineral exploration. Now, as the individual, in wilderness study areas too, yep. As the individual looking to stake a claim or looking to buy a claim from someone else, you need to understand the procedures so that you wind up at the end of the process with a valid mineral claim, which means that you own the mineral rights under that area. It has to be open to mineral exploration. This is something you have to determine yourself. It has to be federal land open to mineral exploration or state land open to mineral exploration under the specific laws of that state. In either case, the state specifies the exact procedure for locating the mineral claim. For example, one difference in Arizona versus here. In Arizona, a 2 by 2 inch wooden post was acceptable as a monument. Over here, nope, it's got to be at least 4 inches in diameter. It could be round, whatever, it's got to be 4 inches in diameter. And it could be a pile of rocks 4 feet high. It can be a tree at least 8 inches in diameter blazed on 4 sides. These specifics depend on the particular state. So you need to research that with your state, see what the laws are in your state. In the case of Montana, Bureau of Mines and Mineral Resources has a book, How to Stake a Mining Claim in Montana.
Wow.
2 major types of mining claims in terms of what you're locating: placer and lode. Lode means bedrock. Placer means soils, gravels, cobbles, things like that. If you stake a lode claim looking for the placer material, it's not valid. You do not have those mineral rights. And vice versa, if you stake a placer claim, that doesn't give you the rights to the lode. I can tell you exactly why that is, Alex. They had 2 major ways of giving land to citizens in the past. This was to get the West populated. One was homesteading, one was mining claims. Now, if you homesteaded, you did not get the mineral rights. You got the surface rights. That was it. So the mineral rights are still open, and you can therefore stake them. And you have to check what the rules are in your particular case. For example, you might be perfectly able to stake a claim out there on that guy's farmland, but you put a stake in the middle of his field, it's going to disappear. Okay? So that's something you need to research carefully in your jurisdiction. You also have patented mining claims, and there's some potential complications there too. A patented mining claim gave them the placer rights, the lode rights, and the surface rights. But between the time that patent was approved and now, the mineral rights could be severed from the surface rights and sold to someone else, or this, that, or that. A lot of times the federal government came in and worked out a trade or something. So there may be mineral rights that were severed, and so you can buy the surface rights. This is an old patented claim. I'm going to buy that, and I'll have and not have the mineral rights. You have to check very, very carefully, and that's again something that's very much site and state specific, but it can happen. So when you stake your claim, you have to first of all have a discovery. And that means something that would lead a prudent person to believe that valuable minerals may be extracted at a profit. Around here, that generally is quite often an old mine. Okay. Then you have to put up a discovery stake. It has to have a document holder. And in Montana, you need a notice of location, which you put in the document holder. And then within 60 or 90 days. I think within 60 days or 30 days, you have to go to the county courthouse and record a certificate of location. It's a different form. It has basically the same information on it. It describes the claim, the owner of the claim, this, that, and the other, where it's located, how to find the corners and this, that, and the other. And you file that at the county recorder's office, and then you get either that copy or a copy of just a Xerox copy of the recorded copy and send it off to the BLM and and that sort of thing so that it's done. But during that process, you go from a simple discovery monument to you have to monument the four corners of the claim in this state. In Arizona, you also had to do two mid-end line stakes also. Okay. Again, it varies state by state. And generally, it'll cost you about $250 in paperwork fees to stake a claim, roughly. The BLM filing fee, the going down to the county, recording it at the county, things like that will generally be about $250. Okay. The paperwork can be a little bit annoying. In Montana, they use meets and bounds to describe the claim. And it's really a pain in the butt. I have found if you do have a reasonable forest around, it's a lot easier to blaze trees than to carry 4x4 stakes. Okay. Now, the problem with that, boss, is if the fees have gone into arrears, the claim is no longer valid. Okay. It is now just like there was no claim. So you'd have to go out there and restake it, so to speak. Now, if the monuments are still good, and that could be just unscrewing thing and putting something new in the paperwork thing and then filing the paperwork again. Okay. And so you can't just pay the fees and it's automatically yours. You actually have to refile the paperwork if it has gone essentially into arrears. They didn't do it this year and they're past the deadline. You can take it though. And this is another thing. You're supposed to once a year check to make sure all the monuments are up and legal and this and that and the other. There's a lot of claims on the internet, okay, for sale. We have personally examined some claims and found that the people who are selling these claims now are sometimes not completely, what would you call, diligent? The problem with one we found in Montana here was the corner monuments were 2x2 posts. Well, that ain't legal in Montana. If it's not legally monumented, it doesn't exist legally but the BLM won't know it until you dispute it. Okay. So if you ever buy a claim from someone, you need to verify not only that the paperwork is current and all that other stuff, but also that the monuments are there. Okay. They may not have even put up monuments. That's called paper staking, where somebody just gets their GPS coordinates off a map, stakes it, files the paperwork, pays the fee, and says, "Okay, I've got a claim now." You do not have a claim. It is not legal, and therefore anyone can come in, dispute it, and win. This is why if you buy a claim from someone, you have to verify that not only the documents, but the monuments are in place. Okay? So that's very important. Can be annoying, but yeah. There was something I was thinking about. Every year you have to do certain things. Okay? You have to file paperwork with the BLM, and you have to file either small minor waiver or a notice of intent to hold with the county, and then that you file with the BLM with your annual claim holding fee. If you file a small minor waiver, then you're basically saying, I've got less than 10 claims, I've done all this assessment work, this, that, and the other, and BLM goes, oh yeah, sure, unless they don't, in which case then you're screwed. We have had it happen where they've disallowed that on a technicality twice, causing us to have to, again, refile all the paperwork on those claims. Okay? And let's say this is where you need to be careful. The notice of intent to hold works just fine in terms of paperwork. It shows it was there. It's at the county recorder's office, so anyone who's researching your claim at the county recorder's office can see that. File it with the BLM with a fee, and you're pretty much covered. Okay? So I prefer doing that if you want to make sure you don't, get screwed. Claim improvements yearly. As far as I know in Montana, you don't have to make improvements if you pay your fee. Okay? If the BLM gets their money, they don't really care.
But you do need to keep mining records that show the things you do.
Especially
if you're using a waiver.
Yeah, if you're using a waiver, then you have to do assessment work. Some things count as assessment work, other things do not. Again, it depends on the particular office in this case. But you need to check with the BLM office to see what they accept as legitimate assessment work and keep records of that, what date you were there, doing what, etc. Okay? And that works fine maybe in Canada, Rock, but in Arizona, the office down there I filed it in person a month and a half before the deadline. 2 weeks after the deadline, they say it never showed up. Things like this. Or they say that it wasn't properly filled out. The form wasn't properly filled out. But they don't tell you about that until after the deadline. So then you go, if you pay them, then there's a financial transaction as a record of what the timestamp is and everything. Okay?
And that's all they actually want is money.
That's what they're basically trying to get. They don't like that small minor waiver because they don't make any money off of it. I'll say it's perfectly legal, but they just have this nasty tendency of finding a technical detail and waiting until after the deadline to tell you, oh, we didn't accept that paperwork. And it's now too late to file it.
Yeah.
So you're just going to have to restake the claims and repay all the fees. It's bullshit, but they're the guys who make the rules.
Yeah, it happened twice to the tune of several $1,000s each time.
Exactly. So that's why I recommend paying the fee. And yes, it's not legally necessary, but the question is, do you want to take the chance on having to restake it or losing your claim?
Or finding out the hard way you lost your claim.
It depends on what kind of a mine claim, Brian. If it's a patented claim, then a tax lien can work. Okay. If it's an unpatented claim, there are no tax liens or anything like that. Okay. And so there's all kinds of things about that, but you do need to maintain that claim, whatever it is. If it's a patented claim, you're going to have to pay property taxes, etc. There's stuff you have to keep doing. You're also supposed to be out there once a year checking your monuments and paperwork and everything. People will take the paperwork out of the thing. Environmentalists have been known to pluck out stakes and throw them away, all kinds of things.
And then report.
That the claim's not valid, or overstake it themselves. They grab the mineral rights with no intent to use it, just to keep everyone else off. So one thing you can do there is take pictures of your monuments with your smartphone that has a date stamp, and preferably a GPS stamp too. So you've got actual photographic proof that on this date at this location, there was my stake right there. Okay. So it's a big hassle in some cases, but the environmentalists don't play fair. The government doesn't play fair, etc. So I say, you got to use caution. Assuming that you've got the mineral rights secured, whether you're leasing it from someone else, you bought a valid claim from someone else, you staked your own claim or whatever. Once you have the mineral rights, now you have to explore the situation. Now, right now we're working with some newbies and kind of showing them the ropes and stuff, and also getting some good video. And so in doing that, you need to examine the situation, determine what kind and where samples you need to take them, and process them to get some kind of results. In the case of a hard rock mine, especially an old mine, you're usually going to have some sort of a structure that will presumably have the valuable mineral in it. And you're going to need to sample that. And for all the newbies out here that, I keep forgetting, not everyone's been here for years. When you have a vein, you sample across the vein, you cut a channel across the vein. I just put up a video recently where that's what we were doing. And also when you see changes in the vein, you sample the different things that are visually different samples. Now comes the fun part, and that's analyzing the samples. Fire assays cost a lot of money. And if the samples aren't taken properly and prepped properly, they can be worse than useless. They can be misleading. Take a channel across the thing and grind it up, split it down, send off to an assay lab, get a number. That's going to cost you some money. So what samples do you need to send and how many? Well, hi, honey bunny. Cool, Rock. Thank you. So anyhow, when you get your samples, hesitate to spend that kind of money if you don't have to. And so, is there another method to deal with this? The answer is yes. It's not as reliable. It's definitely not as precise, but it can be extremely useful and it's quite cheap. The first thing you're going to need to do with hard rock ore is you're going to need to be able to crush it. Okay. And you need to be able to crush a fair amount. That is a problem. Okay. Doing it by hand is extremely difficult and time consuming to get any kind of stuff. I happen to have what I consider probably the best all-purpose small crusher out there, Keen RC46, which I bought for like $8,500 and now costs over $13,000 with the trailer mount. But it's got a jaw crusher over rolls crusher. You know, I can throw in a 5-gallon bucket of material through it in about 10 minutes and it comes out as sand. So it works just fine for prepping samples. That's a little bit of money for most people. Okay. Sure. You can actually apply your time too. Depending on your qualifications, Rock, you can apply your time. Okay. Like someone like you, oh, you could charge $50 an hour. You bet.
Or $100 an hour.
So anyhow, for an ordinary person going to get started, the absolute minimum would be something like a Cobra crusher or something like that. But they're pretty small sample. You can buy a small chain mill, you know, like about a 10-inch diameter chain mill for you can do maybe a pound at a whack there or whatever. And oh yeah, Rock, I'm sure I did. I said you could do that, no problem. I don't know, I'm not sure what your ordinary fees are, but you could certainly charge them off as that. But a little chain mill like that, that'll work on samples. You know, you break it up into smaller rocks with a hammer or whatever, blend it properly, and then take a sample and grind it up. And then you can hand pan. Now, hand panning is not guaranteed, but I have yet to run into a high grade ore that doesn't give me easily visible results. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean it's real precise. Because the gold can vary so dramatically in crystal lock and size and things like that. If I'm panning Montana B ore run through the RC46, I'm only going to see like maybe 20% of the gold, 25%. But if I go top of the hill, I'm going to see like 50% of the gold. If, as Alex mentions, if it's bound up in sulfides or something, you might not see any of it, but you will see the sulfides, and it'll let you know you got sulfides there. So once you've got these visible results, first of all, you can, like we went and we took 8 samples from that mine that we did the video on this week. I crushed them up this morning. I'm starting to pan them out now. So far, I really haven't seen diddly, okay, which is really discouraging. But that mine might not have been a gold mine. You know, we don't really have a lot of information on the past. So we can't really tell for sure with the information, the paperwork the claim owner had. That doesn't mean it can't be found out, but nothing he had gave us any definitive information. But so far I haven't found anything that made me go, yeah, there's a good result. Top of the hill, and Montana B, yeah, I can pan that stuff. I can see stuff in it, no problem. By the way, little one, remind me to bring some rock back to show Aaron how to pan. Okay,
Yeah.
some ground up rock. Okay. Um, the hand panning technique will usually work pretty well down below 500 mesh, down below a little bit below a thousandth of an inch. Okay. So actually, Alex, I would dispute that. My method can go pretty fast too. You do have to be careful not to be nearly as violent as you can get away with placer gold. Okay. Um, but I can process a pan in less than 5 minutes and get pretty good recoveries. So the microfine gold hand panning technique that I use is usually good enough, consistent enough, and sensitive enough to give you some what I call actionable intelligence. We took 8 samples. If we have 2 samples that show visible gold and 6 samples that don't, you can send off 2 samples to the assay lab. Okay. If they come back, 0.05 ounces per ton, then voila. That, okay, the panning is doing pretty accurate. There's not a hell of a lot there. On the other hand, they come back 2 ounces to the ton. You go, okay, there's a lot of gold there, but it's really, really fine. Okay, I need to run those other samples. When you're looking at more stuff in that location, once you've calibrated your hand panning a little bit, you can use it as a primary sort, so to speak. You just save money on assaying. Now, if you got plenty of money and you want to, go ahead. Okay. And that's why I say the hand panning is extraordinarily useful. Okay. It really, really is. So you want to try to work some kind of a sort so that you can do a lot of samples quick and cheap. You can do it in the field. Okay. You can have one of the little gas powered impact mills and prep samples in the field. You can also screen samples in the field and then pan the screenings. Now that is almost certainly going to be somewhat of an upgrade, but it's real simple. Okay. So again, what you're doing is you're looking for actionable intelligence, not hard numbers. It's not going to give you hard numbers, but it'll tell you this is better than that, or it's most likely better than that. This has got gold in it. That doesn't have any, I call it pannable fine gold, PFG. Okay. So that's cool. Cool, honey bunny. Like to see it. But anyhow, that's the thing. Once you've done enough sampling, then you can start analyzing the situation and see, first of all, you have to determine whether or not it's possible to make money. And if you've got a vein that's running 0.05 ounces per ton gold, and that's all there really is valuable in there, it's a 2 foot wide vein. No, there's no known method of making money on that. Okay. So you can eliminate that. But if you got, like, say, 1 ounce per ton, a foot wide, Now you have to start looking in it more detail. You have to start doing extractive metallurgical tests. How can I get the gold out of the rock? Okay, sometimes it's pretty simple. Crush it fine, do a gravity separation. Most times that won't give you a super good recovery, but it may give you, the vast majority, like 70, 80%. And you can just stockpile the tailings for later chemical processing if it makes it worth it. Okay. On the other hand, it may be a much more complicated extraction. It could be real microfine gold like we have in Montana B, or it could be a refractory gold. It could be an arsenopyrite or iron pyrite or something like that. And that's going to be a lot more complicated and expensive. Okay? And these things you have to test and calculate. It's always ore specific and project specific. Your cost of mining, how much is it going to cost you per ton of material to get it out of the ground? You've got all kinds of things to take into account. But the first thing you do way back at the beginning is once you've got the mineral rights, you start sampling and confirming some numbers to see whether or not it looks plausible. Hey, Jean-Francois. So I say those are things you do. Now, it's entirely possible that you may find something that you can't make money at, but somebody else can make money at. The most common of these is just a large low-grade ore body. Okay, there's this vein there, and it was running a 1/4 ounce to the ton, and you're really not going to be able to make much money on it because it's a little harder to mine and this and that and the other. And you got to do all this, and it's not going to work. But the whole mountain that this is in averages 0.05 ounces per ton. Hi, Red Wing. And, when you got 10, 20 million tons at 0.05 ounces per ton, a small or medium-sized mining company might be interested in that. Sends you on a different way of making money. And that is selling or leasing it to another company. You don't have to process it yourself in order to make money. But in order to know what you're selling or trying to operate or whatever, you got to have some kind of numbers. So sampling, analysis, and then say if you get to the next stage where it's like, we got samples that show potentially profitable grade. If we can operate on then you need to get in the extractive metallurgical testing. As somebody loves to say, and, but that's just how it goes. Once you finally got to the end of that process, you may actually be doing a profitable mine. Or statistically, much more likely going to the next project because the vast majority do not work out. Rock, what in general of the stuff that you've looked at, and Rock usually doesn't look at stuff until it's pretty interesting. They got a significant amount of results. What percentage of the ones you look at turn into profitable mines in your history? If you don't mind, just a rough number. Okay. The one I heard in the past was 1 out of 300, Alex. But a lot of that depends on how you define a prospect and how you define a mine, too. But yeah, it's definitely not a good thing. Do not get involved with this business thinking, I'm going to retire, take my retirement savings, invest it in a gold claim, and make money. Very, very dangerous. Okay? You need to husband your resources carefully while you're doing the exploration, and do the exploration as cheaply and efficiently as possible until you have a proven project. Okay? Now, Rock is a professional. He's been doing this for decades. Look at those numbers. Do you want to bet your future on those numbers? No, you do not. You can have a fun hobby that's not horribly expensive and have the chances of getting rich, but don't count on it at all. Okay? This is why the people that consistently make money in our industry are the ones who flip mining claims and sell equipment. Those are the guys that make money steady. Okay? A significant number of the people who flip mining claims are disreputable. I don't want to make money that way. A number of people who make mining equipment don't inform you well enough for you to make what I consider an informed decision. Okay? They go to sleep at night thinking it's their problem. They should have done their due diligence. Okay? I don't sleep that well that way. Okay? But I've been, ever since the 80s, I've been working to a greater extent to get my own profitable mine. Haven't got it yet, but I've had a lot of fun getting there. Okay? Video channels, nowadays, you're probably correct, Honey Bunny. I didn't think of that, but I'm pretty sure that you are correct. People like Dan Hurd and Jeff Williams and such, they probably have a significant income from that sort of thing. Okay. I know Jason from Flower Gold Wizards is working on that and doing a very good job while keeping the quality of his videos good too. But it doesn't interest me, so I don't focus on that. You take care, Jean-Francois. Everything's going good with Eva and me and most of the other people here. One of the things I have a problem with the TV shows is that they do not emphasize how difficult it is. Okay. And that is, unfortunate because it misinforms people. Okay. And people think that it's a piece of cake, and it's not. The crystal collector makes 7 figures easy from his YouTube videos, huh? Wow. Cool, Alex. So I agree, Rock. They're about the.
If we're lucky enough to have crystals.
I agree that they are about the drama. I've seen some stuff, and I'm like, yeah, right, that really happened. Sure,
I'll take things that never happened for 500, Mr. Trebek.
Yeah, but anyhow, so those kind of shows encourage people to take excessive risks, in my opinion, and I find that to be reprehensible. Eva was quite trepidatious about doing our little, what would you call it, cameo almost?
Yeah. A little incidental appearance there.
I agree, Rock. I think that was a good decision on your part. And now, another thing like, what's his name? Chris Ralph. He made his money, doing projects and stuff, apparently, and doing just fine, which is great. he's fairly knowledgeable and like that. But he made his money off of the professional stuff before even getting into the YouTube thing. With someone like you, Rock, yeah, I could see where you'd be very trepidatious about, especially as the damn contracts that you sign is basically, okay, once we take videos of you, we can do whatever we want with it. You can't say anything about it. It was a very, very one-sided contract, I will tell you. So be very, very careful. If you ever wind up dealing with any of these video people, the TV people or whatever, make sure whatever you do, whatever they capture on video, you will not be embarrassed by. Okay? Because that could easily happen. They like, hey, Walt, how's it going? They like to make entertainment, which is not necessarily good for you. So be very careful. We were extremely cautious with what we said and what we did to make sure that, if that video is watched by BLM or DEQ or anything like that, not a problem. So just be aware. They work on the principle of we've got the power. You're just not even the tool. We're like the raw material. We can do what we want with you. Cool, Brian. So, I say, just be aware of that. And even because we have very modest desires, it's real easy to be happy. So, I say, figure out what it is that you want to do, what makes you happy, and then try and go with it. Well, and it's not just your training, honey bunny, although that's important. It's the techniques, your level of commitment, because you can't get too committed to a new property if it's not a good property. So that you're committed to the process, you check out a property, if it's not good, throw it away, walk on to the next one. You saw Rock Butcher's numbers there. 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000. And those are the ones that have already been kind of sorted a bit. So that thing. Another thing that is good to get the basic skills and knowledge is either join a prospecting club or go to work for a crew or a mining. If a mining company is doing exploration in your area, see if you can hire up as a laborer or whatever. Okay. But get as much experience and knowledge as you can as low as cost as possible. That will maximize your chances, and learn how to quickly sort the possibilities of a new mine or new prospect quickly so that you can walk away quickly and cheaply if you can. None seem to be hiring, huh, Alex? Interesting. I know somebody who's working for one. I could ask around, and I don't know. If you had videos, we might be able to have, pictures or something, we might have an idea, but it could have been all kinds of things. Okay, Alex, I'll make down a note. What about your seasonal stuff, like Alaska and everything now? Uh, I would think that with the prices of precious metals like that, the small and mid-sized companies are really going to start cranking up their exploration efforts here pretty quickly. I'm not sure where and like that. Yeah, so I would expect there to be another wave of interest in the precious metals with what's going on with the prices, with what's going on with the world. You might see a lot of trepidation over the next year or so, especially as you have two possibilities for administrations in the United States, one of which would tend to be much more um, minerals friendly than the other. So, yeah, I say I would understand it. If I was, if I had money and stuff, I'd be being very, very careful with it right now because I just feel tremendous uncertainty, you know, and say that's kind of what I would think. But once things shake out a little bit and the companies have an idea of what they think the price is going to be and where the areas are that are safe to invest in, um, then I think there'll be a lot of activity. Yeah, I would think you'd see a multi-year boom in exploration. So I think you're kind of well positioned, but you know, make your contacts now because when it busts wide open, you're going to have a lot to do. Yeah, it'll hard to make it hard to eat also. Um, yeah, Rock Butcher might have some information too, Alex. You know, that seems like a um, good credentials, Alex. If you've got a good valid claim, honey bunny, and they decide they want it, you might be able to get some good money though. It's hard to tell, but they will try and steal it from you. That's for sure. Unless you want to sell it to them cheap. Good question, Rock. Um, yeah, that might not be a bad idea. Hmm. Okay. There you go, Alex. Hmm. I say I'll check with my contact that they're doing some exploration around here and see what's up and what they need, and go from that. Let's see. Geo and mining engineering. Bachelor's degrees in both, right? Let's see. Let's see. Of course not, Rock. If you do your job well, bachelor's in bachelor's and option. Yeah, if you do your job well, after a few years, like with Rock, as he says, then you've developed a network of people who know you're an asset. this is how, when I move to a new area, uh, I'm not, a geologist or anything like that, but I'm a good worker and I can do home repair, remodel, and stuff like that. And so once I met several people, I can get odd jobs pretty easily, but it does take time. So yeah, I can sympathize, Alex. And also, sometimes it's easier if you are more mobile. If you got a company in the United States that's doing a project in Peru, Peru's probably not good. They got a lot of geology there, but Tierra del Fuego or something, you know. But yeah, it's tough getting started and getting the network and the reputation and stuff. Just be very careful not to mess with your reputation. Okay. Make sure that nobody has any legitimate reason to be talking you down. I say, but that and by getting the oddball jobs first and then getting that experience, then you can get the easier to deal with jobs. And right now, you're pretty footloose and fancy free. This is the time to really get your adventuring in. Okay, so you got stories to tell. When you're no geezer like myself. But reputation is critical.
Well, the oddball jobs are great for reputation too. You
Well,
tackle something that requires thinking outside the box,
yeah, Alex, but
and you shine.
at least you got some job experience. Um, and if they said, "Yep, the guy worked his ass off, didn't complain," then you get you got at least that kind of a reputation. That might be the thing it takes to get into the next job, and hey, it gets
Ron
easier as time
says
goes.
Alex should visit the Alaska Gold Forum and hope the tech posts by GeoWizard are still up to read.
Did he send you a text?
Yeah, he sent me a text because he's not signed up for texting on YouTube thing.
Well, he's been commenting here. Okay, so what's the message, little one?
Give me a second.
See, Rock just put a thing. It's a start. I've cut thousands of meters of core, buddy. We could have used you in Arizona for channel sampling, but are staffed up as of last week. Okay.
Go to something called the Alaska Gold Forum.
The Alaska. Jeez.
I'm going to see what I can find out here.
Alaska Gold Forum. Okay.
Yeah, the Alaska Gold Forums.
Yeah. Try checking that out too there. I've heard some people.
There are posts up from somebody. There were posts there from somebody, tech posts.
Yeah.
From somebody named GeoWizard. But yeah, I mean, looking into forums is always a good idea.
Yeah, there's no high rises in Montana. Yeah. And they're not building a lot of dams lately. I don't think there's any even big road construction projects that I know of. But yeah, a geological engineering thing is, different than mining engineering. But I mean, I'm sure geological, if you're doing a testing for a dam, I'm sure you're doing core samples and stuff too. So Rock doesn't think that's nearly as significant as some of the other people you've talked to, apparently. And I'd trust Rock. He's been around the block more than a few times and seems to be pretty honest and sincere. But yeah, getting started is tough, but you don't have a wife or kids or anything like that to hold you back or anchor you down. That makes a big deal. Yeah, I just really don't know what's up in the geological engineering right now because, again, a lot of this stuff is kind of economy dependent. And right now, the economy is in kind of a slowdown with a malaise because the uncertainty out there. Nobody really wants to make a big investment. And anything that really requires geological engineering pretty much requires some investment, you know? So I would expect, to say, a lot of uncertainty in the markets in the next 12 months. People are going to be very cautious about their investing. Now, they've got a project in process or whatever, and they need to just keep going or else lose it. Yeah, they're going to do it. But then those are the people that tend to be staffed up, you know. The other thing you could look at, Alex, is there's a lot of emphasis on environment right now. And sometimes they need the engineering. You've got the lithium exploration, that sort of thing.
Has she considered seeing if the Montana Department of Environmental Quality needs somebody?
Yeah, he was suggested, Montana Department of Environmental Quality, Idaho DEQ, places like that may need stuff like that. I understand, Alex. I say sometimes you have to be a little less picky at the beginning, but your situation is your situation. You have to deal with it in the way that you need to deal with it. Thing about government agencies is they usually have money.
Yeah. And it's usually job security until you get into something else. And a lot of times it'll make you more attractive as a hire to a mining company because they figure you have inside information.
I had a friend whose son was did geology, but he became a hydrologist and wound up working at Rocky Flats on the remediation stuff. And last we heard, he probably had pretty good job security because they wanted to remediate it to below background levels. So that's going to take a while. Yeah, just a strong back, Rock. Same thing. Even if you're just hiring for a labor job, it's easier for them to have someone that knows kind of what's going on. You may be overqualified, but at least you got something. Yeah, honey bunny, he figured they had real good job security. That was a retirement level job at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, but because in Denver there. But holy Toledo, yeah, he thought that was pretty pretty unattainable. So yeah. However, the government has a budget to keep plugging away at the unattainable for a long time. So as it's just one of those things that it's ridiculous at times, but you gotta put food on the table. Okay, take care, Rock. See you shortly. Um, I understand, Honey Bunny. Back when I was single, and I mean, when I was married, 3 kids, didn't have anything like that. I just needed, you know, hours and money. Now I'm very picky about what I do. Um, so I'm careful what I do because I want to make sure she doesn't lose any more respect for me. What?
Nope.
Jumping in?
My turn. My turn.
Wow, you're eager.
Well, I want to get it over with so I can get back to doing what I'm doing. Hi, everybody. Well, take a gander at these numbers behind me here. Now, note the ones on top are closing gold and silver on Kitco, going into after hours trading. The ones down below were the closing numbers out of Shanghai. Shanghai, you might want to remember, is about, 18 hours ahead of us somewhere. They open again at some god awful hour of the morning, our time. The interesting thing here is the spread. None of us have seen a spread on silver like that in forever. The average spread in US dollars between Shanghai and here, you may see $1, you may see $1.50 at close, you may see gold a couple of dollars shy of US gold. But to see that kind of a spread of over $4, and it was rising the last time I checked, a spread of over $4 on silver, a 10% spread. And seeing that kind of a spread on gold, a $13 spread on gold is pretty radical for the difference between us and Shanghai as well. There are interesting things going on. Hi, herbalist. Hi, MJ. Hi, Kodak. Hi, everybody. Hi, Honey Bunny. So there are interesting things going on in the metals markets. Now, there is massive speculation as to why this is the case. On the US side, what people are speculating is it has to do with people's unease about what Jay Powell and Yellen the Felon and the crew are doing over there in Mordor on the Potomac. And there's a little uneasiness around the stock market. And you may have noticed the war drums are beating a little louder since apparently there was a helicopter crash over there in Iran, that resulted in the death of the butcher of Iran. Oh, excuse me, the president of Iran and his foreign minister, and a few other hapless individuals that were stuck in the same helicopter with them. Now, this whole story was rather interesting because right from the get-go, Iran said, well, they had a hard landing on the side of a mountain due to weather. Well, considering that they crashed at a 90-degree angle into side of said mountain, I don't think that qualifies as a landing exactly. And then the local news over there reported that they tried dispatching 9 or 10 rescue helicopters and all kinds of other things, throwing resources at this problem. But the high winds and the near whiteout fog and other horrible weather conditions made it impossible to get there to rescue anyone. Then they announced one person was dead, but they were still looking for everybody else. And then some yo-yo telegram channel somewhere started bleating that Russia did it. And then some other people started bleating that Israel did it. And then a few lone voices bleated that the United States somehow managed to shoot down this helicopter from somewhere. Thank God that rumor went away real quick. And then people started celebrating around the world long about 6 or 8 hours before the Iranian press made the news official that they were short one president and one foreign minister. It should be noted that the president over there is actually something of a figurehead. He's not the guy that calls all the shots. It should also be noted that the foreign minister was simply the foreign minister. And it should be noted that the UN, the WEF, several major governments, and our State Department were all having moments of silence and sending sincere thoughts, prayers, and condolences to the Iranian people for the loss of their beloved butcher president of Iran. Just saying. So that may have something to do with what's been going on with gold and silver. Another thing that may have something to do with what's going on with gold and silver that is currently just an unconfirmed rumor that is probably true, but nobody's saying anything, is that apparently my Vlad the Impaler, my Vlad the Invader, my Vlad, our favorite Russian and everybody's next candidate for world dictator, if you believe all of the European governments, apparently seized the assets of several European banks, including Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank, totaling about 700 million euros. But that story just kind of immediately disappeared and everybody's studiously ignoring it. So obviously it's probably fake news. Yeah, just saying. But that may explain why the Europeans are once again pounding on the drums of war and saying that we need to nuke Vlad like immediately. I really don't know why they can't take care of their own problems at this point. Hello. Sorry. Meanwhile, it isn't just gold and silver that are doing amazingly beautiful green things this week. Copper, our backbone metal, is also getting a little bit of a boost from this. Several other metals are getting a good boost from this. Another day, another copper price high. In heavy volume on Monday, copper for delivery in July hit a record intraday level of $5.19.9 a pound, $11,460 a ton. After the equivalent of $68 billion worth of copper lots exchanged hands in 24 hours, the brown metal is up 35% so far in 2024, with most of the gains in the last few weeks. Hello. Big Red is roaring out of the station. And believe me, this is a very good thing as an indicator for a possible long bull run. We want to see copper continuing to advance. Oh, and in case you missed it, that number in Shanghai, when Shanghai opened in the morning, silver limited up in the first 10 minutes, and they had to temporarily halt trading. So there's something going on over there in Shanghai, so good for them. Jeff Curry, ex-Goldman Sachs and more recently Chief Strategy Officer of Energy Pathways at asset manager Carlyle, told Bloomberg in an interview headlined "Copper is the new oil." No, it's not. That copper is the highest conviction trade I have ever seen. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Goldman has been calling copper at today's prices for at least 3 years, but Curry's reading of the Energy Pathways now sees copper going to $6.80 a pound. $15,000 a ton, people. Mining.com has been banging the same copper drum based on the metal's position at the nexus of the green energy transition. But Curry adds 2 other tailwinds to green capex demand to get copper to $15K. Green energy transition, AI data centers, and military demand. Add the long lead times to build new mines, just ask Rio Tinto about that one, tight inventories, and Curry says the 2021 call is finally paying off. You cannot come up with a better story. I'm confident that this time it is liftoff. The goddess thinks he's being just a little bit too optimistic at the moment, but by golly, it's beginning to look damned interesting. I will say that. Curry also points out that only at 15,000 would copper match its inflation-adjusted all-time peak reached in 1968, which came off the back of a housing boom in the United States. Copper peaked at 72 cents in February of 1968, and as it happens, during that tumultuous year, McDonald's first introduced the Big Mac to America. Obviously, those two things are intimately connected. The Big Mac was priced at 49 cents. Today, the Big Mac is a cool $5.99. Says Curry, if you go back to the 2000s, and I was bullish on oil then as I am copper today, you know oil ended up going from 20 to 147 times. The upside on copper here is very significant. He's not wrong about that. Not sure exactly where on the $20 to $140 spectrum copper is trading today, but if this is the argument copper's the new oil, we'll take it. Yeah, copper is the new oil. So what does this mean for those of us in this business? Well, first of all, it means if you have not gone out and checked your claims and made sure everything is exactly as it should be this year, you better hustle your little tail out into the field and do so, okay? It is the goddess's firm belief that because our Bureau of Land Management is still being absolutely useless and incompetent, they are truly, what was that word? Oh, yeah, scobberlotchers. They are scobberlotchers, okay? It is a genuine word. You can look it up. They're all a bunch of scobberlotchers over there. And the thing is, they still haven't caught their database up to the present time. So you now are going to have a perfect storm of problems because you're going to have people coming in new to the mining, wanting to prospect, wanting to get that gold claim after watching some show like Backyard Gold or Gold Rush or something else unfortunate. They're going to want to go out there and get that gold claim. But because the records are not up to date, a lot of claims that do exist and the paperwork is right on the claim and the monuments are right on the claim are not showing in the big databases that everybody checks. So John Q. Public.
I saw Florida. You called
John Q. Public is going to go check this database that is supposed to be the be-all, end-all of accuracy. Looking at a particular piece of land, a particular old mine, and he says, whoa, nobody's claimed it. I'm going to go right out there and claim it. So he goes out there, and as happened to us last year, he finds some claim stakes and he finds some discovery paperwork, and he figures, oh, well, I guess the claim must have lapsed. And he puts his own shit in there, okay? Now, this is, at this point, because you have an innocent party, that's the fault of BLM and the other government agencies who are scobberlotchers and are sitting on their fat asses instead of doing their job and keeping the records updated. We pay them big fees and they do nothing. They can't even keep their records up to date. This is a problem, okay? But in addition to people like this, who will usually just apologize and take their things away, as we saw last year when it happened to us, if you talk to a genuine person, they'll say, oh man, I had no idea that was the situation. I'm really sorry. And they took their stuff out and all was well. But you also have a whole bunch of scammers. The world is rife with scammers right now. These are people who are going to be going out and staking every claim they can find, and sometimes just paper staking those claims, not putting out the monuments or taking your paperwork out, even though they looked at the dates on it and saw it was good, and putting their own in and claiming that, well, because the BLM doesn't have their records updated, your claim is not valid. You've got to fight us. And then they'll sell your claim out from under you, which is really not a good thing. The third group of people you're going to have are the people that may have genuinely not realized that they were buying a claim that belonged to somebody else. I think we may see this problem more with placer miners here in Montana than hard rock, because people don't mess with hard rock because it's too damn hard. It is difficult to do. You can't just go out there and set up a little dredge in your creek and get big, pretty gold nuggets. Don't happen that way. But say you bought a placer claim from one of these scammers, and the scammers give you all the paperwork that looks all nice and official. Or maybe the person you bought it from wasn't actually a scammer. They were a flipper that didn't realize, they were innocent of scamming. They just went and staked claims and they overstaked you. Or they didn't realize that your claims were still active because BLM is all fucked up. We all know how that works. But this person has gone and bought this claim, and they decide they're going to go out and start working this claim. And you show up one day to work your claim and you discover somebody is working your claim. That is going to be an issue. The other side of that is you may have people that have kept up a claim for years and just never worked it. So, they show up and find some total yo-yo work in their claim. This is going to be a problem. This problem is going to get a lot worse this year because our government agencies are incompetent. Well, they're also malicious and idiots and a few other things that the goddess will not say in mixed company. Scammers are going to be scamming because those prices are going up, which means they can get a whole lot more for their claims than they used to. And a lot of people that never had an interest before now are going to have an interest. So these are things you have to watch out for. This is why this time of the year, everybody needs to make sure, A, that the BLM actually has your paperwork recorded properly, that you can go in, look up yourself in the system, and yes, your claims are showing as active. They're there. And your county recorder has your claims, and they're showing as active, and they're there. And your paperwork in your monuments is this year's paperwork. I don't care if your state doesn't mandate that you change the paperwork. Every time you pay your fees and get your paperwork updated, you go and you change your paperwork and you take pictures.
Okay. Just a second, I'm going out here
with your little geo thingy so that everybody knows. Because otherwise, you don't have much of a leg to stand on. And if you do run into people out on your claim, be polite. Don't start serious issues until they have proven to be people that need serious issues. The last thing you want is problems. But there are going to be problems because with these numbers climbing, people are going to want to take advantage. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, that makes the most sense. And yeah, MJ, you're going to see it everywhere. It's especially bad out here in the West because we have such a target-rich environment. You have a target-rich environment in Southern Oregon. People in Idaho have a target-rich environment. People here in Montana, where we have 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 closed down mines at the very least that are not Superfund sites, are going to see a problem. There will be issues, and the issue is caused because the government agencies we are paying to keep records, to at least record our fucking records, are not doing so. They're taking the money and sitting on their goddamn asses. Which is why the other thing we need to start doing, we must begin reactivating our mining districts. All of the West has mining districts. We have one right down the road from us called Radersburg. If you have mining districts in your area and your mining claims are in a mining district and it is not active, look into finding ways to get it active again. It usually means electing a few officials, getting together the miners in the area, having a meeting and saying, okay, we're going to be official. Find out what the rules are and begin activating your mining districts. We need to start fighting to protect our right to use public land because, trust me on this one, our federal government, according to that number back there, is in trouble that you cannot even begin to imagine, okay? You can't begin to imagine. But I will put this in context for you. Did you know that if you counted one number per second for 1 trillion seconds, going backwards in time, you'd be in the year 30,000 BC. Okay? So 32,000 years. In 100 days, we add $1 trillion to that number. So in 100 days, well, you figure out just how bad that is. And guess what? Our dearly beloved federal government owns the mineral rights, which means at any given time, they can decide to start fucking with your paperwork. At any given time, they can start deciding that allowing mining claims to happen is just too damned easy, so we have to really jack up the cost of the process or really make it a whole lot more difficult to happen. At any given time, they can decide to close entire sections of the West, like here in Montana, Idaho, Oregon, areas with big gold, big silver, big resources, to public use entirely. And then next thing you know, somehow through some land swap deal, some big mining company will be able to swap some useless desert in the middle of New Mexico for prime gold and silver land or prime oil and copper land or whatever, acre for acre, with 10% going to the big guy or 10% going to various legislators, etc. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. We don't own that land, which means we must band it together for protection. We must begin reactivating our mining districts and getting people to start practicing mining law and land use law and beginning to fight back to get control of our public lands. We are running out of time here, people. Okay? But that's enough of that, just so you know. I mean, just saying, at the moment, can you update that number back there?
I don't know. I think I probably could.
No, the 34 is still the same. The 753 is the next number.
Yeah.
And then 774. So that's where we are, just since the beginning of the business. Okay. And yes, one of the reasons we're seeing a little bit of nice activity in the metals is because, believe it or not, people are beginning to think that perhaps our federal government statistics and numbers are less than trustworthy. Perish the thought. Really? So we need to ask the question, and the Fed, and replace it with what? This is the burning question. Because last week, Representative Thomas Massey did something that every once in a while a grandstanding Congress critter will do. Now, mind you, the goddess fully approves. He put forth the bill to abolish the Fed, not audit it, not revamp it, but abolish it. Okay? Last week, Representative Thomas Massey, Republican Kentucky, introduced the Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act. The bill would do exactly as the title suggests, abolish the Fed. The goddess is fully in favor of this, by the way. Americans would be better off if the Federal Reserve did not exist. Massey said, the Fed devalues our currency by monetizing the debt, causing inflation. Really now? No shit, Sherlock. Massey's bill directs the Fed to transfer its assets to the U.S. Treasury Department and thereafter cease operations. Left unstated in the legislation is how or whether the Treasury Department would assume the role of managing the nation's currency. That's a big issue. That's how you can tell this is grandstanding, okay? Some far-left members of Congress also want to transfer control over monetary policy away from the Federal Reserve. They want to control it directly themselves. Oh, this could go really well. Proponents of the so-called modern monetary theory, that's the MMT, in case you missed it, want the government to be able to create limitless quantities of US dollars out of thin air in order to pay for any and all spending Congress authorizes, thus bypassing the need to issue bonds and sell them to the Fed. Let that sink in. The Congress critters in Mordor on the Potomac want to begin printing money out of thin air, not even selling bonds. Okay, where you go down? Yeah. Handing Congress the power to inflate the currency supply at will is an obvious recipe for disaster, given the legislative body's propensity to spend recklessly and rack up intractable budget deficits in the process. Sound money advocates believe if the government's going to be in charge of issuing a legal tender national currency, then that currency should be backed by, or better yet, actually comprised of something with real value. Yeah. I don't, I know just the thing. Salt. Salt, absolutely. Fine, we can eat our money. That works. Our nation's founders provided a blueprint for sound money by defining dollars in terms of a specific quantity of gold and silver. Ending the Fed is a necessary step toward restoring sound money, but any monetary system based on unbacked, irredeemable fiat currency controlled by bankers or politicians is inherently unsound. Well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. So, yes, Representative Massey has put forth a nice little showboat piece of legislation that's going to go absolutely nowhere. This is something along the lines of Ron Paul and Rand Paul's repeated efforts to audit the Fed. The Fed does need to be audited. They also know it's not going to go anywhere. Okay? Never gonna happen. Just saying. But that is where we are in that regard, which is a perfectly good place to be. And then, inevitably, as always happens when we see price movement at all, someone asks the question again, could we see $27,000 gold?
1,000, not 100?
1,000.
Thousands.
That seems far-fetched. But financial analyst and investment banker, oh yeah, like we really trust investment bankers, Jim Rickards makes the case it could happen. And monkeys might fly out my butt. Yep, totally. The goddess will go into revised ideas of where gold and silver are going after this. Gold charted a big rally in recent months, hitting a new all-time high of over $2,400 a month last month. Even with higher prices, gold demand has remained robust. Central banks globally are adding gold to their reserves, as have investors, particularly in the East. There are certainly plenty of reasons to be optimistic if you're a gold investor, but Rickards believes we could see $27,000 an ounce by 2026. Well, we'll see what happens with the election. This might not be so far-fetched. How could it happen? It almost seems absurd, doesn't it? Not quite as absurd as Joe Biden's commencement speech the other day, but, well,
How about the guy that was like the head of the economics thing that was trying to say why we needed to borrow money instead of just printing it up?
Oh, yeah, that yo-yo.
That was hilarious.
That was hilarious, too. Rickards insists he's not just throwing that number out there to get attention or shock people. He says it's not a guess. It's the result of rigorous analysis. Rigorous, no less. He arrives at the number by considering the price of gold if there was a monetary gold standard, which is why, yes, it's not that far-fetched. Rickards concedes there's no appetite for a gold standard right now, and he is correct. Many people, in fact, are aptically averse to gold standards right now. They have no interest in a form of money they can't control. It took about 60 years from 1914 to 1974 to drive gold out of the monetary system. No central banker wants to let it back in. But what if they don't have a choice? What if confidence in command currencies collapses due to some combination of excessive money creation, competition from Bitcoin, levels of dollar debt, a new financial crisis, war, or natural disaster? In that case, central bankers may return to gold, not because they want to, but because they must, in order to restore the global monetary system. Now, this is where the goddess will remind you of a very interesting point. Shortly before one Franklin Delano Roosevelt put out his executive order saying that American citizens could no longer own gold and you had to turn it in, gold had a value of $16 an ounce. And it is estimated that somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of people actually were silly enough to turn in their gold coins to the government for $16 an ounce. After which time the federal government, through arbitrary fiat activity, arbitrary law laid down by President and Congress, declared the new value of gold to be $32 an ounce. One wonders how pissed off the people who turned their gold in were. But just saying, if it did reach a point of confiscatory action by a government body on behalf of banks or by banks with government force behind them, the goddess is pretty sure that's what would happen, is these countries that do this would look at their numbers and they would say, okay, now that we have X amount of metal, that's our number. How much do we have to value that metal at to make that number go away? I mean, really. While it might not be likely, nothing in that scenario seems out of the question. There certainly seems an appetite for gold-backed currency to compete with the dollar in some circles. Officials in the BRICS bloc have floated the idea. Rickards starts from the assumption it's a possibility and asks the question, what is the new dollar price of gold in a system in which dollars are freely exchangeable for gold at a fixed price? Rickards points out you can't have a price that's too high. If so, investors would sell gold for dollars and spend freely. If the price is too low, people will hoard gold. There is historical precedent for both these scenarios. Rickards said the goal would be to find the Goldilocks price by maintaining an equilibrium between dollars and gold. The U.S. is in an ideal position to do this by selling gold from U.S. Treasury reserves. About 8,100 metric tons or buying gold in the open market using freshly printed Fed money. The goal would be to maintain the dollar price of gold in a narrow range around the fixed price. And what is that price?
Yeah, exactly.
Calculates
it
at $27,000.
Thus the laughter.
Rickards calculates it at $27,533 an ounce. He used the M1 money supply as the starting point and assumes a 40% backing of gold, of notes by gold. Applying the 40% ratio to the $17.9 trillion money supply means that $7.2 trillion in gold is required. Applying the $7.2 trillion valuation to 261.5 million troy ounces in Fort Knox, the Federal Reserve, our federal strategic gold stockpile, yields a gold price of $27,533 per ounce. The goddess will say this. Mr. Rickards' math, the formulas that he's using are absolutely right. The numbers, the goddess shall follow the rule of if you can't say anything nice.
Well, are you perhaps implying that the gold that's supposed to be there might not actually be there?
Oh, you sweet summer child.
Gonna raise the finger? This one or that one?
Oh, you sweet, sweet summer child. Really now?
This one? That one? That one? Which finger? I got them all up.
April CPI, the worst good news ever. The monthly rises in prices based on the Consumer Price Index came in slightly lower than projected, sending a wave of euphoria across the financial landscape. All the bankers had euphoria boners, obviously.
A trouser tent?
Transparently so.
Oh my goodness.
The consensus is cooling inflation puts Federal Reserve interest rate cuts back on the table. Oh yeah. The Dow Jones, S&P 500, and the NASDAQ all hit record highs after the data came out Wednesday. A CNN headline called the CPI report encouraging, and an analyst from CIBC Private Wealth US told CNN the data supports a Fed rate cut in the fall. Just in time for elections, huh?
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Yahoo Finance called it a soft reading on consumer prices. It was great news, except it wasn't, When you look at the data objectively and in a broader context, it becomes clear the price inflation dragon the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government unleashed during the pandemic is alive and well. He might be resting, but he certainly ain't dead. On an annual basis, prices rose 3.4% in April, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics data.
Oh, sorry. Can't control myself.
That was down just a tick from the 3.5% reading last month and met expectations. To put it in a little broader context, the annual CPI print was 3.2% in February and 3.1% in November. On a monthly basis, prices rose 0.3%. That was below the expectation of 0.4% monthly increase and the primary source of the euphoria boners, heretofore mentioned. But annualizing that monthly number gives you an annual price inflation rate of 3.6%. Nowhere near the Fed's mythical 2% target. Also nowhere near reality, but that's entirely inconsequential at this point. Prices have gone up 1.6% in the last 5 months alone. Hardly a cause for celebration for those of us who have to pay the prices. Excluding the more volatile food and energy prices,
Of course.
as if anybody can exclude such things from their budgets, core CPI was up 0.3% in April, down a tick from the 0.4% read in February and March. On an annual basis, core CPI was 3.6%. Looking at the core CPI data over the last 6 months provides more context. It came in at 0.2% in October, 0.3% November and December, 0.4% in January and February, 0.3% in March. In fact, it's been mired in this range since last July. It's important to note none of these numbers are close to the Federal Reserve's mythical 2% price inflation target. And they bear no relation to reality. Just saying. You can argue the April numbers show a hint of cooling, but we've seen that before. Everybody was convinced prices were falling and inflation was beat last summer.
We identify inflation as beat, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to do is identify it. Got it.
We identify that number back there as a budget surplus. Absolutely.
Cool.
Meanwhile, producer prices rose 0.5% in April, with prices for final demand services increasing by 0.6%, and the index for final demand goods up 0.4%. Producer prices are generally a leading indicator of price inflation because producers pass at least some of their rising costs on to consumers. When you put all the data in context and look at it with an objective eye, it's pretty clear price inflation remains sticky.
Sticky?
Sticky. It's sticky. It's the stickiest.
Okay.
Dude.
Weird name.
And keep it sticky. Like sticky notes, sticky, tacky, persistent.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, inflation is worse than the government data suggests. No shit, Sherlock. The government revised the CPI formula in the 1990s so it understates the actual rise in prices. And they re-revised it again like last year or the year before. Based on the formula used in the 70s, CPI is closer to double the official numbers. Well, actually, it's now almost 2.2%. 8 times the official number. Just saying. So if the BLS was using the old formula, we're looking at a CPI closer to 6%. Using an honest formula, it is worse than that. Using an honest formula, I have seen around 9.4% seems to be most people's household average. Okay. Digging deeper into the numbers, we find the rapidly new and used vehicle prices helped pull overall CPI lower. Used car and truck costs fell by 1.7%, 1.4% month on month. New car prices dropped by almost 0.5%. Meanwhile, clothing costs spiked by 1.2%. Service prices were up 0.4%. Energy prices with gasoline rose 2.7%. And shelter costs continue to climb at a 0.4%. While prices continue to rise, workers are falling further behind. Average earnings fell 0.2% on the month as wages failed to keep up with rising prices. It's fair to speculate car prices are falling because people can't afford to buy a vehicle with other prices still climbing. Put in context, the CPI report provided very little good news for people struggling with rising prices. The only real positive is the monthly rise on paper wasn't quite as bad as expected. We finally got an overall CPI report that wasn't worse than projected because they cooked the numbers. Everybody is desperate for interest rate cuts. Yeah, the problem is we really can't do that right now. The rest of that article is even more depressing than the part the goddess just read. But what it comes down to is more people are actually beginning to realize that perish the thought and color me totally unshocked and absolutely not surprised. Federal numbers are full of shit. Just saying. And things are not all bright and shiny and wonderful. Live spot gold at the moment is $2,425.70. And silver is at $31.77 on the overnight. So we're doing good there. But what we are seeing now is more people are beginning to realize that if the government numbers are not consistent with their personal lived experience, then maybe the government numbers are full of shit. As bizarre and unaccountable as that seems, it may well be the case. And more people are finding it harder to make the money stretch the length of the month because costs are going up and that's not going to change. So if you are not yet taking all the excess colored toilet paper that you can scrape together and putting it into commodities, now is really a good time to start. The goddess is a fan of consumable commodities like your grocery cabinet and your household goods because that particular sector of investing is returning incredible returns on investment at this point. Just month over month, it's returning extra good results. So yes, stock your dang pantries. Always a good excuse to stock the pantry, as if anybody really needs an excuse to stock a pantry. Just saying. Stock your pantries. Look at fixing those things that you can fix. And if you can find ways to pick up extra money here and there, it's a good idea to do that because this is the time to lock it in to some form of commodity. Some of that commodity should be precious metals because, yes, the price went up. Today, I was, in fact, actually a little bummed because when I went down to my local coin shop, I picked up 3 absolutely gorgeous things. One, I'm trading with a friend of mine for an equally gorgeous thing that he found that I don't get up here. One, I'm keeping for myself. And, well, the other 2 I'm keeping for myself. But if I had bought generic rounds, I would have only been able to buy 3 anyway with no change left over. So yeah, it's getting a little harder. The budget is going to have to be adjusted upward now to accommodate the new metal prices. But this is the time to do it. Because you may remember some months ago, the goddess told you that I expected gold to be hanging out between 2,300 and 2,500 for some time. Then it was just going to go kind of sliding back and forth more between 23 and 24. And there'd be a little profit taking here and there. I wasn't anticipating any major breakouts. I also said that I would not be
Agreed,
surprised if silver reached $30 by mid to late summer. Well, for whatever reason, part of it being what's going on in the world right now, part of it being the shift in people's attitudes is beginning to happen. Those numbers behind me may well represent a new floor for gold and silver. In that regard, I'm watching that spread between Shanghai and the US in silver. That spread should not be that big. That spread is historically around a buck or two. My question right now is when that spread shrinks, is it going to shrink in the Shanghai direction? Is their number going to come down? Or is our number going to rise up to meet China? That's what I'm watching. Because in this regard, gold and silver usually do run in opposition to some extent. If there is a discrepancy in the gold price between Shanghai and the US, it's normally not all that big. This is the sign that there may be a divergence going on in the international perception of metals. So the goddess is going to go out on a limb here and say that if these numbers hold as prevailing averages for the next couple of weeks and the gestalt settles in, we may well be looking at 30 as a new floor for silver and 2350 as a new floor for gold, which means I would expect, first of all, that we will see larger fluctuations in the price of these metals in the short term because the markets are destabilizing. The pressure is going on. The shorting cannot continue unabated the way it is right now. So we will see wider fluctuations. But with these new floors, we could well see silver hit $34 by the end of the year. Gold hit 2550 or so. A new range for gold of 2350 to 2550, maybe even 2400 to 2600 because gold usually maintains about a $200 range. Silver usually maintains about a $5 range at most. It should be noted we've already broken out of that range because silver was trading at around $22, $23 back in March. And here we are in May and we're at 30. So things are going on, which is why you want to concentrate on putting your money that is losing value, your currency that is losing value, your Canadian currency, your American currency, whatever country you're from, your paper currency that is losing value into commodities. 3 types: durable commodities, tools, appliances, fixing your roof, fixing your car, not buying a new car, clearing out debt, making sure that you position yourself well for a long-term economic downturn. Wealth building, silver and gold. Every paycheck, even if you only buy 2 dimes, even if you only buy 1 buffalo round, every paycheck you toddle your happy self to a local coin shop and you buy some metal and you bring that metal home. Third commodity, disposable commodities, food and household supplies. Yep. Outlier. It has always puzzled me that all of the large arbitrage that I see only happens in paper metals. arbitrage has been going ridiculous in the paper since Friday. On Friday, we had 954 million ounces being shorted on the COMEX in paper. Okay. And the longs have been trading contracts all day. On Shanghai, the paper trading that was going on when they opened was so drastic that they had to enact a cooling off period. I'm assuming that physical doesn't get the same arbitrage going on because it's such a pain in the neck to ship and store.
They would probably try.
Tyler, yes, they would probably try to confiscate gold, which is one of the reasons that the goddess, well, other than the fact that you never ever buy paper metals. If you buy paper metals, consider them to be imaginary, just like Bitcoin. I'm not saying you can't invest in them because, as I was just saying here to Outlier, yes, there are arbitrage opportunities up the wazoo for this stuff right now. There's all kinds of trading going on in the paper markets that is just bizarre and ridiculous. There's also all kinds of movement going on in cryptocurrencies that's kind of bizarre and ridiculous because they really are imaginary. There's all kinds of movement going on in the stock market all the time. The paper markets are where you see most of the arbitrage. And if you want to play with paper, the goddess has no objection to this. Just make sure it's a reasonable amount of paper. You never walk into a casino with more money than you're willing to lose. Consider the stock market, the paper metal market, the bond market, all of it a big casino that doesn't even have pretty dancing girls or free booze. Okay? It's a big casino. I don't play in that market because I don't like it. Yes, you can get lucky there. The house will win sooner or later. You can get lucky there. But that's not where I concentrate the bulk of my ideas because I am a very conservative person. I am a conservative with real money. My fiat debt instruments get turned into real silver and maybe real gold that is always available to me.
Unless it gets lost in a boating accident.
Yeah.
Darn tragic boating accident.
Except, yep, you never lose if you don't gamble, Kodak. Exactly. And yeah, Tyler, the thing with Bitcoin is nobody around here will take it. I mean, if we wanted to buy gas with Bitcoin in Townsend, I don't think that could happen.
Can't imagine.
You know, there are places. I mean, I'm sure if I lived in San Francisco, after you stepped over all the piles of turds on the ground and found one of the 23 stores still open in the entire city, they might take Bitcoin. I don't know.
Who'd want to?
No idea.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. This is why you take your fiat and you put it into commodities. Yeah. If you see a great opportunity in paper and you think you've got money that you can afford to lose and you want to play with that to get more debt instruments that you can put into something practical and useful, by all means do so. But don't ever do it with money you can't afford to lose. Do not ever use currency you cannot afford to lose in any paper market. It's very, very simple here. And when you do get your profits, take your profits, pay your capital gains, run and turn that fiat into something useful. Okay? And until next week, if you don't own it, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So get out there and own it. Bye-bye.
Oh, dearie. Let's see how this works. Oh, that's the wrong way. Really need to go over here. There we go. Outlier says thank you. Alrighty. So, time for the post tinfoil hat recap of the night. Well, last week had a busy week. We went to see Jeff's mine, took some samples, be processing them soon. Um, the mill seems to be working pretty well. The sluice is working better than anticipated. If you look at the pans on the thumbnail, you can see to a great extent. MJ Smith says, "Thanks, Eva. Love your hat." What you can't see is that first pan. You not only have greater width, but also depth. But the first mat was getting everything over 250 mesh. It looks like, didn't see anything bigger than that further on down. The second mat, the Devon Gold VDR, was getting everything above 1/1000th. And then the final hog mat was getting some 1/1000th and smaller. So 550 mesh and smaller on the last one. So it seems to be doing pretty well. As you go down the sluice, you only find smaller and smaller particles and fewer of those. So that's good. And then it's dumping into the agitation tank. Take care, John. And then I just got a pump in the agitation tank, recirculating it. Yes, it's dirty water, but it doesn't seem to be hurting anything. It doesn't seem to be hurting the recoveries. So we shall see as we keep using this system. We'll do longer and longer batches. No outlier, and that was a surprise to me. I expected to find the mill itself was trapping some of the coarser gold. It's just not blowing it up out of it. And I cleaned it out several times, and that is not apparently happening. What's the resident time in the big tank? Basically a minimum of 24 hours. Okay. With agitation with the Eco Gold X, it's a minimum of 24 hours simply because we only have so much time to deal with stuff. In practice, quite often it'll be about a week because we'll start the week, dump the tank, put solution in it, start filling it with ore. Next day, finish filling it with ore. Next day, is just agitation. By then it's time to head out in the field and do field work. So we don't really have time to dump it and restart. So we'll just let it sit there for another 4 or 5 days.
Tape.
Packing tape. We got masking there.
Okay.
No, Brian, because we do not have line power and the solar system out there is very modest. So we have to run a generator in order to do the agitation. And we don't want to run a generator when there's nobody there. So we shut off the power to the pumps when we leave and don't start it until we show up again. Would it be agitated the whole time if we could? Yeah, absolutely. It would definitely go faster. We are not sure how fast it's going to work, but it's likely to be pretty good considering we're getting the 500 plus out of the way first. So we shall see. Experiment will let us know. But that bottle roll we did last fall, over the winter time, we just kept it in the house and shook it up about once a month or whatever. And those samples are at the lab now. So we can see what the difference is between what it was after 24 hours and what it is now. I'm not allowed to give out that information directly, Brian, but that was from resin that was loaded last fall, and some of it we pumped solution through this spring, and we couldn't actually give you a solid number anyhow, but if I had one, I still couldn't give it to you. Our recoveries should be in the 75, 85% range on that, but it may take quite a while because after we agitate, we dump it out on the pad and it keeps getting surges of solution dumped on it as each new tank goes out there. So say it's a little hard because of the pad itself to tell, but overall recovery should be quite good, and we'll see what this top of the hill and the mystery dump stuff do. And then we're still looking for some other high grade possibilities. And Jeff Kablock said, for example, he wants to give us 10 tons of 1 ounce to the ton. How deep is the pad? Right now, it averages less than a foot. Okay. We've only got, I don't know, 10 tons, maybe 12 on it.
I know we had more little pads of paper like this.
There. And right. Should be, just had some. Way back there. There you go.
Yeah. In other
Hold
words,
on.
thank you.
But anyhow, the pad also filters everything, so we get reasonably clean solution. And actually, no, in general, we put a cover over the pad and the pond so we don't get rain dilution of the solution, and we can pump off the precipitation. Otherwise, if we had a fairly wet spell, we might overload the system and get overflow. So by putting covers on the pregnant pond and the pad, we can pump off any rainwater if we wish to. If we don't, we can always just put it, into the system. But we rinse it with the solution from the next batch. And, you flood one batch out there, it settles, and the solution soaks through the pad and comes out the drainage system clean and clear. It's a little tan colored, but I mean, it's clear. And then when the next batch gets dumped on top, it goes through the last batch and the batch before that and the batch before that and like that. And so it's constantly getting rewashed with leach solution. Okay. And we have spent so much time in the field, etc., that it's kind of hard to tell exactly, with any precision what's going on, but it seems to be doing pretty well. And the main thing, essentially a heap. It's a pad, but it's essentially a heap leach. But it's also a dewatering and clarification setup that requires no, equipment to do. It's all stationary, static stuff, and just physics does it. So that's our evil plan. It seems to be working well. As you may have noticed, my philosophy in general is to try and do as much as you can with as little effort as possible. So I like to use things like gravity wherever possible. On my impact mill, it's got, aside from the engine, which drives it, one moving part, and that's the rotor. Okay. That rotor feeds it because of the vibration. It busts the rock up, it classifies it by blowing it uphill through a tube, and it transports it to the next stage of the process, all with one moving part. I like that kind of elegance, also because it's designed to focus all the wear on a very small area of the device. It makes it easy to hard face stuff. Yeah, I can understand that, Brian. I say cyanide does not work without oxygen. That's why when they do a Merrill Crowe cementation, they deoxygenate the solution first, then they can cement the gold out of it, and it does not redissolve, and then they reoxygenate the solution afterward. That's pretty easy to do. If you were using hydrogen peroxide or some sort of chemical oxidant, then it would be a lot harder to deoxygenate and reoxygenate. So I say we'll see. We're not sure what kind of the oxidation potential is required to get what in the way of kinetics, etc. But the dissolution is apparently in the Eco Goldex, at least, increased dissolution rate with increased temperature. But we can't afford to heat 1,000, not 1,000, it's 500-gallon tank very easily. A lot of capital investment, and then you have energy that you have to feed into it. So it's just one of those things where my general philosophy is keep it as simple as possible and go from there. That's why we have the leach pad. It not only does the filtration and the dewatering, but it also continues to scavenge gold out of the ore. Why not? So I say that's the basic system. And there have been times where those precipitation covers have really captured a lot of liquid, which can then be taken out of circuit without a problem because it's physically separated from the leach solution. Yeah, it would overrun every year if we didn't do that. We'd just be dumping solution out the spillway, so to speak. We're not using a hydrocyclone. We use an air cyclone dust collector for the output of the impact mill. That's over a bucket, and the bucket just has simple water injecting in the bucket itself. The cyclone itself is dry, and then the dry, call it precipitates, but anyhow, the solid product that's coming out of the bottom of the cyclone then goes into a bucket. There's water swirling around, and it then goes directly onto the sluice. So yeah, when that mill is running, it's beating the rock essentially dry. A little bit of moisture doesn't hurt. Very much moisture, and it can actually cake on the inside of the mill and close off a hole that big. Yeah, it's just blowing because the ore feed inlet is very close to the axis of rotation, and the outlet is, on the perimeter. It is a blower. It is not a super efficient blower, but it's a pretty good blower. It blows. And so that air that's being sent up the column, it's apparently able to lift the crushed ore pretty effectively. I was actually surprised at how well it lifts the gold. I was expecting that I would be finding gold in the bottom of the mill housing, and I could, after running some, I could sit there and hose it out and pan it, and I'd see a significant amount of coarse gold. I am not seeing that. I'm getting the occasional chunk of steel. We also may have native copper. That's what I should have asked, Rock. That was what I was going to ask, Rock. What does native copper mean, considering the other stuff we're seeing?
Well, ask Adam if he's still here. He should know that.
Alex, you mean?
Alex, yeah.
Yeah. But
Alex should know that.
we are getting copper, clearly detectable metallic copper chunks, not huge.
And randomly.
And they don't look shiny copper. They've been kind of beat up, and even all the beat up surfaces look kind of red. Yes, Outlier. Let me show you. Oh, let's see how well I can do this. I'm gonna have to make it real big. We have an impact chamber. It's basically octagonal. We have a shaft, has 4 paddles on it. There's a cover on this side, and that cover has a hole right in here and a feed chute with a grizzly above that. But the hole itself is right here in the cover. Up here, this has an outlet. So as the ore comes in here, the impactors hit it, accelerate it, and there's a deflector here. It hits the deflector, keeps going past this opening until such time as it's small enough to get around the deflector and make that turn, and then it blows up the exhaust stack, which takes it to the dust collector. Without the deflector, it's just throwing rocks up. But this prevents that. And then all the wear plates inside here have striker bars that do 2 things. Number one, they focus the wear right here, which can then be hard faced, and they protect the heads of the bolts, which hold the plates in. So the bolts don't get worn out. Anyhow, by doing that, you have the inlet close to the axis of rotation, the outlet at the perimeter, and it is a blower. And it is effectively blowing the gold and the heavies up that exhaust. Absolutely. That doesn't seem to be the case, Tyler. The taller the pipe, one would think you get a little bit more classification, but there's a certain air velocity going up that pipe which will transport a certain particle size continuously. Okay? And this design that I have seems to work pretty good at getting a pretty fine grind with not a whole lot of oversize and without actual classification, normal. It's using elutriation as the technical term. Call it air classification, whatever. You have a vertical upward movement of air, and it'll carry a certain size particle of a certain density, a certain shape. Now, another thing that I really like about this impact mill is that it takes the gold and turns it into little balls. Okay? I don't know for sure on the real small stuff, the 1 or 2 thousandth of an inch, because it's kind of hard to see. But as far as I can resolve it down, they are all balls. As they go in there, they're bouncing around, and it,
under the microscope, they're still balls.
Eva says under the microscope, still balls. Balls, round sphere is the easiest thing to get to settle in that sluice box. And So they seem to work really, really well. If you've got a ball mill like Red Wing Mine does, and you're doing it by crushing the ore between surfaces like that, it tends to come out in flakes because it gets mashed like this instead of rolled around. And as such, it tends to make it floatier, so to speak. At least looking at the stuff that's, he's shown, that's exactly what I'd expect out of a ball mill. That makes it harder for gravity separation to work. Okay, all else being the same. So, our sluice is doing a great job at the 1,000th of an inch, 550 mesh size particles. Apparently, is as best I can see. And that is surprising to me, especially as it's running fairly gently, and yet it's not plugging up with oversize in the wells, in the vortex matting and stuff like that. It's just doing a fine job. And at least this next batch that we run is going to be 500 pounds before clean out. And we'll see how well that works. We'll see whether we start getting more gold towards the bottom of the sluice. And we'll just gradually keep working it up until we have a batch size that's either, first of all, we're going to have to stop at some point just to refill the gas tank on the engine. Okay. So that's going to be call it the minimum and the maximum individual batch size. I've been doing 300-pound batches. I can do 4 or 5, don't know. Unlike an RC46, which has a jaw crusher, this thing, the engine can stop running on you and it's not a disaster or a pain in the ass. You can just pull the bucket up on the feed and, kind of reset, put more gas in it, restart it, and get going again. With the RC46 with that jaw crusher, if you stop the shaft and the flywheels on that jaw, you're not restarting it. You need to sit there and dig everything out of the jaw crusher and open up your rolls before you can restart it. Okay? So we shall see. I need to take a break from time to time. It's, 300 pounds is a little over an hour. And that's a reasonable time to stop and take a break. Okay? And then I can kind of do other stuff, take a break, make sure I'm hydrated, snack, whatever needs to be done. This batch here, a lot of it, the ore was wet from the wintertime. It was damp. And so I've actually been having to dry it out. And that's, takes time to get it from the stockpile over near the mill, get it spread out, and then, let it dry. The wind was good, so it was drying fairly fast, but it doesn't dry very deep at all. So you have to kind of, lay it out 3 or 4 inches thick and then scrape it off at 1/4 inch increments or whatever. And let's say, so 300-pound max batches seems fine. I don't know how many max batches. Well, I'm not sure. We might be able to do 400-pound max batch. That wouldn't be too much harder, but somewhere around there, I'm going to want to stop just to take a break. I'm a geezer, And how many of those run through the sluice before you need to stop and clean out the sluice? I don't know. It doesn't take long to clean out the sluice. You stop everything, you climb up there, you pick the mat out, wash it out, stick it back in, and go from there. So we shall see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well the glycine works at room temperature, Brian. It'd be nice to do a series of tests, if you could, with like temperatures starting the coolest you've got and increase it by increments, like ideally, starting at 50 degrees, then 60, then 70, then 80, then 90, and 100, and just see how long it takes to dissolve the gold leaf, and then you could plot those on a curve, and you get a really good idea what's likely to happen beyond the curve, Yep, that would be great, Brian. And get me the data and I'll get you some glycine. How's that sound? Somebody gave me a bunch. So, I say 30 seconds at 130. On the other hand, I'm not sure exactly how thick is gold leaf. That's a good question. I know it's pretty darn small. Thick is gold leaf. Excuse me. How thick is gold leaf? No, I care now. 0.1 to 0.125 micrometers. Between 4 and 5 millionths of an inch. So we're talking 1/20th of the size I'm using. So let's assume, just for the sake of the argument, that I'm getting down to 1/1000th of an inch, which is about 500 mesh in gravity gold. And then you are getting 30 seconds at 130 degrees. So we'd multiply that by about 20 to get complete dissolution of those things. So 20 times 30 is 600 seconds or 10 minutes. So that's, pretty quick. I say it's going to take me hours just to fill the tank. It's going to take me the next day to get to it. So if we have something 20 times slower than that, it would probably still work fine for my purposes. I'd still be less than a day of agitation, and that's kind of the minimum for practical purposes that we're going to be running the agitation tank. We still have other potential questions as to the costs and operating costs and things like that. I need some water. Just a second. Ugh.
What?
I need water.
No, it's not what I was wanting about.
So
There's a headline you don't see every day.
what?
Salt Lake City car dealer killed after leading violent coup to overthrow Congolese government.
Yeah, that wasn't on my 2024 bingo card.
Well, not on my 2024 bingo card either.
Yeah, that's the thing. As long as I'm leaching it faster than I can mill it, fine. As long as the cost of operation is reasonable compared to other systems, that's great.
The Democratic Republic of Congo flag behind Biden during his Morehouse speech.
Hard to tell. But anyhow, these are the kind of parameters we have to do. I like the idea of glycine as a leaching agent for a couple theoretical reasons. One, it's supposed to be pretty selective. And two is that it's a food grade product. By the way, did you look at the MSDS sheet on your glycine and see what the LD50 is? For those of you who don't know what the LD50 is, that's the lethal dose for 50% of the population. It didn't even have an LD50.
It had one for rats.
But it did, it did for rats, but it said basically you're not going to see any real negative consequences in terms of feeling poorly. And that's basically what it make you do, feel poorly, until you get, like, for someone my size, it was either a pound or a kilogram
It's
At one
5
sitting.
grams per kilogram.
5 grams per
The
kilogram.
lethal dose in rats, the LD50 in rats was 7.35 grams per kilogram or something.
Yeah. So yeah, it was about a pound. I could theoretically eat a pound of it in a single sitting, and it wouldn't be very dangerous.
Yeah,
I'd probably
you wouldn't
feel
take it.
poorly.
You wouldn't manage it anyway. You'd puke before you ate that much.
And the amount in the solution is fairly small. You're probably right, Brian. Water probably is more. Salt is a heck of a lot more lethal.
Oh yeah.
But anyhow, that should make permitting a hell of a lot simpler. When you go up and say, I want to dissolve my gold with food, it's going to be hard for them to really come up with a good argument. So I like that part of the whole concept. I say it's specific.
I think it would work great on concentrate.
It's relatively quick if at elevated temperatures. Say as long as it's reasonably fast at ambient temperatures, that would be just fine. Say we're looking at stuff. It can probably go 1/20th of the speed that you're going, and it would still fulfill my needs just fine. Now that is a potential problem, Jeff.
What?
Birds, chipmunks, all that other stuff. If you've got a sweet leach solution.
Well, what I'm looking at, I'm still looking at using it in a thing like our stripper, in a small, compact, temperature controlled thing for concentrate.
Yeah, for concentrates, it's fine. I say not a problem. But for tank leaching, pad leaching, heap leaching, yeah, that's probably the big environmental thing. Is you're going to have so many birds and chipmunks, bees, yeah, all kind of stuff. Oh, that'd be hilarious. Anyhow, tank leaching wouldn't be too much of a problem. Pad leaching or heap leaching tend to be a problem. So, yeah, say we need to do a little research here, but that's the thing is, can it work at 50, 60, 70 degrees? If it can, then we're in pretty good shape. Okay, so I really need to know that to know what we can do with it. But yeah, that's pretty hilarious. Well, and the thing is, when I was taking it from the 50-pound shipping sack and putting it into a couple of buckets, just the little bit of dust that's floating up tasted fine. It's like, yeah, it's sweet. You do that with that Eco Gold X, and man, that's some harsh stuff, but not the glycine. So I say it's a very interesting thing, and we need to do some research on that. I appreciate your help, Brian. The idea of using gold leaf allows you to have a good standardized situation to measure in time. Yeah, outlier. Sounds about right. So anyhow, that's an important thing. We got loads of stuff to test. The weather has been functional, but less than ideal. The wind has been pretty strong on Thursday and Friday, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think even some Tuesday. But I mean, we're talking some pretty high winds.
And then we have snow showers.
And cold, not bitterly cold, but in that kind of a wind, it doesn't have to be too cold to get nasty cold. And yeah, it was less than ideal. And the system was crushing ore and sluicing and everything just fine. So I say I'm pretty happy with things. Yeah, pounds of chlorines when we dump our pool. Yeah, exactly, Brian. Don't ask for rationality. Otherwise, the Greens would be going all in for nuclear to save the planet from climate change. But they can't do that because it's all about emotion, not rationality. In terms of, I mean, as far as I can see, they don't have any good data to verify climate change. It might be happening. It might be a real danger, but the amount that has happened and the way it's fluctuating and it's not synced with the CO2, yeah, I'm not convinced. But I do know that certain things that they're trying to implement in order to fight it, yeah, well, those will have definite effects. Absolutely. So you have to make rational analyses in order to have good policies. I mean, I'll call it good. But you have to do a rational analysis. And if you can't rationally analyze something, you're just shooting in the dark. It's random chance if you get a good one. There seems to be some possibility of that, honey bunny. There are a number of people who think that there's too many people on the planet. And as Jordan Peterson was asking the other day, he says, well, they never mention it. How do you solve too many people? So when somebody says there's too many people on the planet and this is a matter of survival of the planet, what does that justify? Yeah, I'm not sure. Weird times.
We are the carbon they want to reduce.
Yeah.
This is a known fact.
So, yeah, we gotta. And a strange thing to me too is lately virtually everyone I've run into has had the same feeling about the situation, the future, and like that. Very unstable, great potential risks out there and everything. And I mean, 100% basically at this point. And yet everyone just keeps doing what they got to do and this and that and the other because there's no obvious other alternative at the moment. What other course of action is there? And so it's kind of surreal. I don't know, maybe it's like when you got a huge storm moving in, it's like, well, what can I do? I've done what I can. Now I just got to wait. That's one of the big variables. U.S. domestic politics is another big variable. The whole consequences of this 10 million illegal migrants in the country. What's that? I mean, we've got about a half a dozen things which are potentially hugely consequential that we really don't know how they're going to shake out. And I don't remember another time in my life where we had more than 2 existential threats at once. And right now we got like 5 or 6. It's like, wow, this makes me feel concerned. So everyone else is kind of getting the same feeling. But again, nobody else seems to come up with a good answer of, okay, this is how we fix it. Everyone seems to be kind of the opinion, plan, whatever, of we'll deal with stuff as it happens. Uh, having one of my friends over for dinner? Not me, Jeff. The problem is, though, let us suppose, for the sake of the argument, somebody, Trump, whoever, Jesus Christ, shows up. Somebody shows up and does the best that can possibly be done, whatever that is. Okay? Whatever that is. What can they do? What is physically possible to do? And what are the consequences? And as I say, we're in a situation where that's impossible to predict, in my opinion. Just too many variables of too large of a magnitude. Hey, you take care, Shaggy. So that's it. I don't know, but it's interesting to see how many people are just like, we're prepped up as best we can, keeping our eyes open, and just going forward. And we'll see how it. Where's that? Oh, you just got here. Well, Shaggy, what are you doing at 9 o'clock? Quite often we're shut down by now. You silly person.
Hi, Shaggy.
And so I don't know. I'm just doing what I can. Ingredients. Trying to make money. Good idea right now, and then use that money to purchase as much security as you can, whatever that comes from. Hey, Alex, I have a guy who suggested that you call him, and he's got some information that might help you locate some possible employment or some interesting stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my plan is to call you tomorrow and give you the information. You're on my list here, and you can follow it up as you see fit. Okay. But and I'll also call somebody else and see if I can scrounge anything up there, because I know they got a project going. I have no idea if they need a geologist or an engineer. Okay. So anyhow, that's basically kind of it for the week. Understood, Brian. And say we shall see what we shall see. But we're doing. Yeah, what was the name of that story? Was it called How to Serve Man? I don't think so.
The one about the couple.
Yeah, I know. I don't think
it was called To Serve Man.
To Serve Man?
Or something along those lines.
I don't know. Let me look that up. How?
That might not have been the name of it.
I don't think so. Serve Man. To Serve Man.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. That's what it was.
So.
What is the upcoming week for us? Well, tomorrow we're going out to the ranch and grinding up the last 500 pounds of ore to finish this batch of the in the agitation tank. We'll pan the sluice and everything, and then we will take all the gravity recovered gold and dry it so we can weigh it, and then we will presumably smelt it down into a bead and get a good number on it. Probably going to have a fair amount of silver in it. The gravity concentrates, you got stuff that looks like gold. You got stuff that looks like a gold silver alloy with a fair amount of silver in it, so it's kind of a light yellow. You got a few things that are bright, shiny white. And you've got stuff that looks like native copper that's been beat up.
Well, I did have a suggestion in that regard.
What?
I was thinking that maybe not this tank if you didn't want to do it this tank, but next tank, we would take all the stuff in the snuffer bottle.
Possibly, Brian.
And I would digest it in nitric acid. First, we'd weigh it after I pick out the copper. And
yes, Brian.
And I digest it in nitric acid, and then we make a bead out of the resulting gold and weigh that.
Yeah.
So we can see, so we can get a confirmation of the gold to silver ratio that I was seeing last year.
Yeah. We shall see what we shall see, little one. I find it interesting that we have these. That's basically the 4 different kind of metallic particles we're seeing.
Yeah.
Because we're doing a magnetic separation, so there's really not any steel in there. That silver colored chunk I saw, the thing that got me was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was pretty fractal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, why wasn't it balled up?
I don't know.
Well,
it was more tangled up. It looked like a silver string.
Yeah.
Or silver wire.
See, platinum is pretty hard. It's a lot harder than gold or silver. So it may actually be some little platinum nuggets.
Well, that's what you were saying last year. I have kind of my doubts about it, but I agree with you. It is odd. If it is platinum, then it, like the gold, will not dissolve in the nitrate. It won't digest. So.
Yeah, that'd be a good test. I mean, steel would digest.
That's one of the reasons that I wanted to try digesting that material. Not this time, but next time. I mean, I want to see what color this bead's going to come out, because last year, the stuff that was looking all pretty and yellow in the pan, the beads were coming out bright white, remember?
Well, another thing you could do is that, look it over, find the, 1 or 2 silver chunks that look weird, and just take them and go ahead and set them in a boat or something and put the nitric on them. And if it's steel or if it's silver or something like that, it's going to dissolve. If it doesn't dissolve in nitric, then it's probably a platinum group, So it's interesting. There's not a whole lot of it, but it would be interesting to find out.
That stuff surprised me because it looked like, for all the world, like silver wire, but it's just so white.
Yeah. Very bright white
and
shiny.
The copper surprises me because I don't remember seeing any visible copper in the ore, but I'm pretty darn sure that you would have noticed copper wire or copper jack.
Not necessarily. I might not notice copper wire, but I would think that any fabricated copper, like copper wire, that runs through that mill is going to be pretty shiny in places. It may have some not too shiny. None of that copper that I recall looked shiny.
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads me to believe it's not pure copper.
I think it is native.
And therefore it would be native, because virtually every copper that you see is essentially pure copper.
Yeah.
Copper wire, copper this, copper that. And so the fact that no matter how it's all beat up, it's all that same color of red.
Yeah.
Makes me think it's native copper.
I think it may well be native copper.
Yeah, that's my thought, because otherwise I think you'd see some shiny. So that's kind of interesting. Oh, we need to look at getting that microscope too. The one for the computer.
Yeah. For the computer?
or the whatever. Remember, like what
We
Jason
were
had?
looking at one for our phone, for my phone.
I don't
We
know.
were looking at one that Jimmy had with a computer screen that is saved in the Amazon account. Or should be.
Yeah, something like that.
And
Do I-
it's gonna have to be the next Social Security check. or
That'll
the
be
next time
fine.
we finally start
Just
getting paid.
reminding you. Did I add jet dry to the mill? Answer: no, Brian. I'm just using straight bleaching solution. And
No weird chemicals in my milk.
yeah, we don't want to add weird chemicals, but also it seems to be working fine. And again, as opposed to a pure gravity circuit, we're not terribly worried about losing some fine stuff in the tailings because that's just going to dissolve quickly in the Eco Goldex. So we're not terribly considering. Brian says that the jet dry is just citric acid. I don't know.
Well, I read the bottle and I didn't see anything about that on the bottle. There was all kinds of salts and buffers and crap in there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. If it floats, it'll leach. That's my thought. Another thing that's kind of helpful, the outlet to the slurrying bucket underneath the dust collector has enough resistance that there tends to be a pool of liquid in the bucket, so that in order to get out of the bucket, it actually has to go through the liquid. So it seems to do a pretty good job of wetting everything. And I say, it's surprising how well it appears to be working. Now we'll have to see how good the leach solution is. Once we'll take a sample theoretically next Monday or Tuesday, probably Tuesday, but it might be Monday because if we're out in the field and we're now parking bugs out at the mill, then we got to go to the mill and drop off the equipment, and it would be easy for me to just go get a sample right then. No problem. So then it'll take, by next Friday maybe to get that done. And then we can get a good comparison between what the gravity recovery was versus the dissolution recovery. We can tell because we know how much solution is in there, and we know roughly how much ore is in there and roughly how much solution. So we can sit there and do the calculation, say, okay, this concentration in solution means we recovered that much gold concentration from the ore. So it should be pretty easy to figure out what's going on there. And like tomorrow, I'll have a good idea how well this particular ore leaches over time. So, yeah, we'll be getting a lot of information. We'll be going out to Montana Bee this weekend. That is the plan. And finishing that breakthrough. Then we come back and then we'll work at the mill. So busy. Got lots to do. Anybody got any questions or anything at this point? Oh, yeah, if you could get a test or two before next week on how fast that glycine dissolves the gold leaf at room temperatures, that'd be really interesting to see. Okay, I'm holding, Brian. The meaning of life, survival, and reproduction.
42.
Sure, go ahead, Brian. And I say, life just is, and it wants to. Yeah, he said 42 also.
Of course, everybody knows this.
But life just survives, because if it didn't, it wouldn't, and that kind of life wouldn't be there. That's just the way it is. It's living is not easy. Therefore, you have to be motivated. And if you're not motivated to have children, that society dies out. That sort of thing. That's it. I'm having a good. I like digging holes. I like extracting gold. I like all kinds of this stuff, honey bunny. We're having a good time. All righty. Okay. So I guess we'll call it a night then. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Sorry for all the computer crap. Happy prospecting and keep it safe out there.